Hello everyone, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and if you've been keeping up with the news and reveals coming out about FM24, you would have seen since we last did a video on the smarter transfers, squad building and finance, 2 new features have been announced for the game, as well as a big reveal about the Japanese league. We'll break it all down for you now so you know everything about FM24. Speaking of, if you want to pre-order FM24 on a discount, you can find all of that information in the description below. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, check out my channel in the description while you're at it as well. As we get close to 25,000 subscribers, any support would be awesome. But yes, I've done all the plugging. Let's get in to what they've announced about Football Manager. This didn't necessarily get a feature reveal, but it was announced in a news article that the J-League, League 1, 2 and 3 in the Japanese divisions are going to be fully unlocked and playable, which to some people you might think, weren't they in the game already? Actually, no. Not every single league is covered in Football Manager, and the J-League is one of the most desired leagues that was missing from the game. A lot of people would be out there downloading mod packs and whatnot to have the J-Leagues in their game, so it's great that we've got the official licensing. You're going to see lots of Japanese Wonderkids popping out from those divisions, and whilst it won't be a huge difference for you guys who weren't going to play in the J-League, for those that were, it's very cool to have. And also if you're someone that likes to start unemployed and maybe do the Pentagon save, where you try and win the Champions League equivalent in every continent, now you have a chance to manage in Japan, so that could be great fun for you guys, and I'm sure it's something that the people who will want to use that will greatly enjoy, and it's always great to have some extra licenses in the game. So that one is getting a plus. Will it affect you massively? Not necessarily if you're not going to play J-League, but it is something extra in the game to have, and that is never a bad thing, particularly with the licenses and stuff. It's always great to have more of them. Then they had the next feature reveal, the first one that will break down out of the 2 in today's video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll do the best to answer them. But let's take a look at what they announced. Now, this is all about introducing intermediaries and offloading players. To sum up what this article is about, it's about how they've changed the way that you kind of sell players, particularly those ones that it's very hard to drum up the interest for. You've all had it in FM23 and previous Football Managers where you've got someone that you're trying to sell and no one bites, but sometimes it's really strange. Like, I was doing a Manchester United rebuild on my channel, which again, you can find in the description. It'll be coming out today, I believe, when this video goes out, or maybe it's already out. But yes, on there, I had Jadon Sancho, and I was trying to sell him at one point, you know, 30, 40 million, no offers. And it got to the point where I was offering Jadon Sancho, a player that is more than good enough. Whatever you think of him, he's more than worth, say, £10 million, which is what I was offering him out for at the end of this video. And still no one was biting on it, which is strange. And it was always hard to get any interest at all. Now there's going to be ways to help you with that through the introduction of intermediaries for offloading players. My thoughts on this whole thing of what they've announced is that it's cool, but it's not necessarily going to change the way you play the game. Hopefully it just makes things a bit more realistic when it comes to selling players. But one new feature they've added is asking the player's agent about market interest. So if you're looking to sell one of your players that you own currently, you can speak to their agent and ask them about market interest. You'll then get the option to have a chat. Here you can tell the agent, look, I'm desperate to sell this player, or you can go the other way and just say, hey, I'm just looking to find out if there's any interest in this player because I might want to sell him. The agent will then let you know if there's any interested parties, the market value for the player, and it's just an extra step that you can kind of do before selling someone to get an accurate representation of how much to sell them for. The same way if you're scouting someone in the transfer market, last year in FM23 you've been able to go ahead, speak to the agent of that player and say, oh, how much is he worth? And then the agent will say, oh, you might be able to get him for 10 million, let's say. Now you're doing the same thing with selling players. You're getting an idea of what they're actually worth and not just using this valuation at the top, because sometimes that wasn't very accurate. So now with the agent letting you know how much interest there is in a player and how much they're worth, you can kind of get a feel for it before you go ahead and offer them out to clubs. As it says here, it's important to note this new function will give you better clarity on potential fees that you can get for a player, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a sale every time. This for me is just a bit of a quality of life change to the game. Not going to blow anyone away, but it's definitely something nice to have. And yeah, cool little upgrade. Very happy with that. We'll take it. Then we have evolve your squad with new intermediaries. What this basically is if you can't sell a player, you can basically offer them to an intermediary. To sum it up, they'll kind of do the job for you in trying to sell the player and then take a cut of that sale, maxed out at 10%. Those intermediaries do the job, like I say, for you, of trying to attract some interest in the player, but the interest they're able to source, as it says here, is determined by new factors. So for example, some intermediaries have bigger reach in certain continents and maybe they'll cost you more or take a higher percentage fee. Not exactly sure how it will work in that sense, maybe I haven't read it well enough, but yes, you can basically ask these outside parties to try and sell your player for you, and they'll take a cut if they do eventually get the sale through. The reason you might use these instead of just offering out to clubs is they have a bigger reach and network across the world, so they might be able to get a club that you never even thought of or was never even interested in your player, basically. They'll put them in front of their eyes. Maybe it's like a Japanese club, as we mentioned earlier, the J-League. Maybe this intermediary has some influence over there. The J-League clubs see this player's available, and maybe then they sign them. That's the kind of thing that it sounds like these intermediaries are going to do, and if it helps you sell those Deadwood players, I am all for it. It's very nice to have. I'm not too sure on the difference between that and the unwanted list, to be honest, because the unwanted list was a section of the game where you could basically put your players in. If you wanted to get rid of them, you could put some kind of valuation on them, whether it's sell for half price, sell for any price, sell for full price, and then your director of football would go out of the way for you to try and sort a deal out, or someone in your staff would try and sort a deal. So how different it is to that, I'm not sure. Maybe the intermediaries have more of an influence in your director of football. I would imagine that is the case. But yes, the intermediaries do seem cool. You'll have different intermediaries bidding basically to try and take your player, as you can see here. So as we mentioned earlier, it's kind of the better the influence of that intermediary, the more of a percentage cut it looks like they're going to take on your players. Now, if none of them can get interest in your players, they'll tell you the reason why. Say, oh, it's because of this. That's what we need to change if we want to sell him. At the same time, other clubs can use intermediaries too, so you might get some news articles come through or scout reports basically saying, look, this player's available, do you want him? So I don't necessarily think these are huge game-changing features, but they're definitely things that are needed. I mean, the amount of times I've tried to sell a player and I can never get rid of them, and we get questions asking, how can I get rid of my Deadwood? I can't sell them. Hopefully, this is going to help us out with that. They've also added transfer room, which are saying is going to be a bigger part of Football Manager in the coming years. This is apparently a tool that real life teams use, where it's almost a platform basically you can log into and see players that are available. That's the sound of it. Apparently this has replaced the offer to clubs option. So if you want to sell someone, instead of offering them to another club, you basically upload them to this transfer room website where other teams can log in and see that these players are available. Apparently this is how it works in real life. And as it says, not every club will be logged in on transfer room at the same time, so not all offers will come straight away. Some will take time, some more quickly, and some that take longer than others. And as it says, this is the start of transfer room's integration into Football Manager, with more to come in the future, likely with FM25. And that is the gist of that feature reveal. There's a few extra little details that I won't go into. That's pretty much everything that they've announced there, which is, like I say, cool. Is it game changing for you guys? Maybe not, but it will hopefully help you with being frustrated about not being able to sell a player, and sometimes that does take you out of the realism of FM, so to have that in the game is great and will add to the realism. And speaking of realism, that is something that's brought up a lot in this second feature reveal, or third, but second one that we're speaking about in this video, which is the changes to individual player targets and interaction logic. Now, this is basically where you're able to try and motivate your players by setting them targets, and it's also useful for transfers you're bringing in too, in terms of giving them a player pathway. We'll talk more about that later, but the first thing is keeping your players hungry with targets. Much like promises and discussions that you can make with players before, you can now set them targets, whether that's clean sheets, match performances, assists, goals, or training targets, maybe adapting to a new role. This in theory will motivate them and give them something more to play for, or also be a way to counteract a player's happiness. It doesn't say exactly how it's going to work, but it does say you can use it in contract negotiations or of a way of resolving a player's unhappiness. I would imagine if someone comes to you and says, I want some more game time, you'll now be able to say to them, well, you can, but if you can score 2 goals in the next 10 games, then I'll start giving you more starts. I don't know if that's exactly how it will work, but it sounds like that's something that will be incorporated in some way. You can use it when signing new players too. In this image, it basically shows a player who in the contract negotiations wants to be an important player, but we aren't ready to give him that yet. So instead we are saying he can be a regular starter and he can go up to an important player if he can score 15 league goals in the coming season, to allow him to kind of motivate himself to do that, to become an important player. And that then gives a player an option of seeing his playing pathway through the squad and makes him want to join your club a little bit more by giving him that exact pathway of how he's going to get there. The same way when you loan players out, you can say to them, look, if you can score 10 goals, maybe you'll be incorporated into the team next season. Maybe you'll get a new contract when you come back, etc, etc. They're a bit like promises though, so if you don't follow up on these promises, so if you say after 10 goals I'll give you a new contract and you don't do it, you break the promise, the player will be upset, and then that player is going to get annoyed. But more on being annoyed later, because they have actually changed how that works with players actually acting out and being annoyed at you. It does explain as well, if a player doesn't hit their target, they'll come to you and explain why that is, whether that's because, oh, you didn't start me enough, boss, or I've had an injury, whatever it might be. They'll talk about that there. And as it says here, to finish off, if you feel you want your star striker to have a bit more motivation in front of goal, or if you want to see your youth prospect make big strides out on loan, it could be a good idea to set them a target, to give them a challenge challenge of something to try and reach towards. They then talk about better conversations with interaction logic changes. These are under the hood, as it says here. There's some big under the hood changes to change how logic interactions work with players. We've all had it where players get needlessly upset about silly things. You praise them for their performance and they go, oh, why did you praise me? I was crap. You know, I hate you now. I want to leave the club. These kind of things can happen in FM, and they do take away your realism from the game, which is something they talk about here. And sometimes that extreme reaction wasn't justified from players, and a lot of the time it's because we didn't have the right options to have that conversation with a player to stop them having that extreme reaction. Now, though, we're going to see less extreme reactions. There's 2,000 new AI responses, apparently, with 3 different variations of severity. So before, we only really had positive, neutral, and negative reactions. It sounds like there's going to be variations of those now, so there'll be extremely positive reaction, decently positive reaction, or just positive, let's say. They're not the exact words that they'll use, but you get the idea. And with negative, they'll be, you know, probably slightly disappointed, very disappointed, and, you know, abysmal. Before, if you criticize the player, they might just say, you know what, I'm leaving. Now they might say, I'm upset with you, I'll be okay in a couple of weeks, or I'm leaving. You know, there might be different variations of how they're going to react to you. I don't know the exact ways they're going to interact just yet, but it's much better, I think, if they have done what they've said they've done here, where they've made it a bit more realistic and less severe in a player's reactions to some things that just weren't required to have a severe reaction to. Obviously, there's some things where a player is more than welcome to get upset about, but some things where they were getting upset for absolutely nothing. They then talk about staff meetings. Now, for me, and I think most of you guys, staff meetings, since they've been introduced, I just request a summary. I never go to them. But if you're someone that does, they've now changed the way it works, where you can do certain parts for a meeting. Instead of skipping the whole meeting, you can maybe talk about 3 things, but not talk about training or whatever it might be. You can see here, coaching, there's an option for skipping that part of a meeting. So yeah, if you like your staff meetings, you can customize them a bit more. But for me, I imagine I'll just be clicking request summary to inbox, but that's a personal thing. Nothing against Sports Interactive for introducing staff meetings. They're just not something that I really use. But there you go. Those 2 feature reveals compared to the first one for me were nowhere near as huge, but the first one was very big, so that is probably granted. The intermediaries thing I think is cool if you're trying to sell players, and new logic with players in terms of the way you talk to them. Yes, that's good. Under the hood changes, that's what we want to see. Are they big, huge reveals that we need to buy the new Football Manager for? Probably not, but if you were going to buy FM anyway, these are cool features. I don't think these are necessarily going to sway anyone, though, if they weren't buying FM24 to buy it, if you get what I mean. Whereas I think the first feature reveal definitely was. So let me know your thoughts on it below. We've still got a couple more feature reveals to come yet. Something about the new match engine, and also set pieces. We'll definitely do a video on set pieces. Whether we'll do a video on the match engine kind of depends how much they announce about it. I think there won't be too many changes because most of that will come in FM25 on the completely new graphics engine that they're developing the game on. But yes, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.